Now, the next part of stringing a lacrosse head is the sidewall, which is all the way down the side of the head. It really is the most important part of the string job because it gives you your channel, your pocket placement, everything. So to start, you're gonna need a piece of string that's about twice the length of the head. This one, actually, probably a little shorter than that. And I like to start the top of the head very, very tight to create a nice tight channel. So you see we're gonna pull this mesh hole down and see where it lines up. And it lines up at about the 5th hole. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go through the outside of that 5th hole, just like that, and put it under our next mesh hole and pull it. And then we're gonna do the same thing we did on the top string. So we're gonna go through that same hole again, which can be a little tough, like I said before. This needs to be melted, which brings me to another point. When your end is starting to fray and it's flat and hard to push through, just take a lighter to it and burn it, and then try to point it and make it a little solid point so it's easier to get through. So back to where we were, we've gone through the outside of the sidewall, through the bottom of the mesh. Now we're gonna go through the outside of the same sidewall hole, excuse me. Alright, then that's gonna go through the same mesh hole. Pull that nice and tight. Make sure that your knot is right up tight to the sidewall. Alright, so you see that pulls it down nice and tight. Now the next one, we're gonna skip a hole to pull the piece of mesh very tight. So we're gonna skip the next hole and use this one. We're gonna go through the outside of the hole. Alright, outside of the hole, through the bottom of the mesh, and then it leaves us this big loop. When we do that, I'll go through it again. You go through, you skip a hole, you go through the outside, and when you pull it, you don't pull it all the way, you leave a big enough loop, just like that. We're gonna go through the bottom of the mesh, and then pull it through that loop. And that pulls it down and locks it right to that hole, and that's called an interlock. So let's go through that again. Sorry, had to let my dog in. Alright, now the next hole, we're gonna interlock and we're gonna skip a hole again. So we skip that one, go through the outside of this hole, through the bottom of the mesh hole, and then through that loop. Pull it nice and tight. Pull it back and forth like that, and it pulls it nice and tight. And now you see it's very tight on that side, and it starts the beginning of your channel. Now I'm going to go through and catch up on this side. Alright, so now I've caught up, and it's very important that both of the sides are not only symmetrical, but that they're pulled evenly as tight. So this side has to be just as tight as this side. What I mean by that is you don't want your knots to be loose like that. You want them pulled nice and tight. Now, we've gotten to about the middle of the head, and we're stringing a mid to high pocket. So this is where we're gonna start making our pocket bag out. And how you do that is you're gonna go through the outside of the mesh. Yeah, you go through the mesh first this time. So you go straight through the mesh, just like that. And then you're gonna skip a hole, go through the next sidewall hole, leave a loop again. You're gonna go through the next mesh hole and through that loop. Alright, got that? You go through the you go through the top of that mesh hole, and then you do a normal interlock. And what that does is it puts 2 mesh holes to 1 sidewall hole, so that it starts to bag out the pocket a little more. And then we're gonna do that again, except this time we're just gonna go through the top of 1 mesh hole, the top of another mesh hole, and then we're gonna go through the outside of the sidewall and through that loop. Pull that nice and tight. Now we're just gonna, by the way, these are all interlocks up here, the first 3 we did, and then that one where we went through the mesh hole and then interlocked, that's called a double interlock. The one we just did, where we just did 2 mesh holes without an interlock, that's just a double, just doubling up on that. And now this, we're gonna do a single, so we're just gonna go through 1 mesh hole. My bad. Gonna go through 1 mesh hole. If I can get it through here with 1 hand. And then we're gonna skip a sidewall hole, go through the outside of this one, pull it through that loop, pull it nice and tight. Now we're just gonna wrap it around the inside of the head. Just pull that tight, and then go through the inside of the next hole, pull it outward, and then we're just gonna tie a knot to tie off. Now I'm just gonna catch up on the other side. And now that I've caught up on that side, you can see our pocket and our channel.